Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lessons in Product Management. I'm your host, John Fontenot, and today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Path to Product. Path to Product helps aspiring product managers gain the product management experience that they need to land their first product management role. If you're looking to get into product management, click the link in the show notes and get started at pathtoproduct.io. On today's episode, I got to speak with Larry Imgrund, product manager at Khoros. And Larry came on to talk about his path into product management, what he was doing before the transition, how he got in, and lessons he learned after making the transition into product management. This conversation is full of great insight, especially if you're looking to get into product or if you're just getting in, trying to get your feet grounded in the role. Tons of great advice from Larry. This is Lessons in Product Management. Let's get started.
Hey, Larry, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday indeed. So, Larry, for the listeners, could you give kind of a brief introduction of yourself, what you do, and who you work for?
Of course. So my name is Larry Imgrund. I'm a product manager at Khoros, Khoros. Khoros essentially is a digital customer engagement platform where we have multiple products, one for social care, one for social marketing, and the other is our community platform, which is primarily what I'm a product manager for. So the history of Khoros goes back to 2001 when lithium started. So we used to be called Lithium. And we built customer communities back in the 2000s. So we had communities on Sony PlayStation, Dell, etc. And then over time, we started to acquire companies in the social care space and started to divert our product direction a little bit and focus a lot more on social care the past decade, while community was still a booming business. So more on that in a bit, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context on, the type of company Khoros is. Today, so I'm focused entirely on the community platform, and our strategy is to, make the best platform we can, of course, but we also want to integrate our community with our own ecosystem of products. So whether it's social care or marketing, you'll be able to do that on your online community.
Cool. It seems like a nice cohesive blend of kind of what you've acquired and brought into the business, and like how do you maximize the effectiveness of them working together. That sounds pretty cool.
Totally. So to really go into, I guess, the next topic, which is kind of like maybe how I got into product management, how long I've been at Khoros is probably the next one. So I started at Khoros, or Lithium, in 2010. So I've been at this company for 11 years now, coming on 12. So my trajectory into product wasn't go and find another job elsewhere and try to break in that way. It was very much so like I started doing a basic job, and I moved up into different disciplines. So are you familiar with online communities, online forums?
Oh, yeah.
Holistically? So for anybody who isn't, it's essentially our online community platform hosts forums and knowledge bases and idea exchanges, and you have a whole network of users that share content on a community, and that provides a lot of value for businesses because it's content that is persistent. It lives, on the web. You can search for it. It's always there. And the best part about it is you can connect with other customers, no matter what brand you're on. So, if you have a community with us, typically, you can reach out to other customers in that space. So what I started doing, I was an online forum moderator. And then I ended up supervising and managing the team that did that for quite a long time. I was still in my early 20s at that point, so I was going to college and focusing on that, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So, I didn't know about product management at that point. I simply was just, trying to pay my way in college while working full time, going to school full time. And I got lucky with an online job. So it was definitely a lot easier than taking some other path. But during that time, I started to learn more about business management. That's what I got my degree in. And then I moved over into a consultant role for helping communities be successful using the product and everything. And that's what gave me a really good understanding on what our customers want to see and what problems they're experiencing, more importantly. And I worked in our professional services organization, so we were very focused on solving problems and using workarounds to do everything. And while we had kind of a tie to product, it was never there was no real I would say kind of like emphasis on the product team to build these improvements because there was kind of just a different focus on the roadmap at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so around this time, I started learning about product management. I spent a few years reading books like on product management, learning about the disciplines, of course, of engineers and designers and anyone else you work with in a product role, because I felt it was important to understand the team dynamics and how to best work with not just your teams, your development teams, but also just the business around it. So once I learned all of that, I started putting stuff into practice. I talked to the leaders in our organization in terms of product management. I let them know this is the path I want to go on, and I pitched a few ideas. Some were good, some maybe not so good, but it was all important to the growth and journey. So anyway, I started in our product org in January 2022. And that's generally the path I took to get there.
That's awesome. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to start kind of from the beginning. So
Cool.
one of the things that people say all the time about product managers is that good ones are often self-starters, right? So you mentioned that you were in school, you were working this job when like moderating the forum, and then you started managing a team while you were in school, which is awesome. What do you think some of the attributes were that got you that first promotion? I know it's not product, but I think from a career standpoint, that would be valuable to kind of unpack a little bit.
Totally. Sorry, can you say the question again? Just the last part.
Yeah. So what would you attribute from yourself, being in school, being an online community moderator, and then getting the chance to supervise the team? What do you think led to that promotion?
Got it. Probably my personality traits in general. I'm really driven, I guess, as a person to better myself every day. I know a lot of people say, you want to do, 1% better every day. I try to do that as well. But I think it doesn't really mean anything if it's not necessarily a goal that you make for yourself. So my goal necessarily in the beginning wasn't, I want to become a product manager. My goal in the beginning was, I want to become a manager of this team. So when I became a manager of the team, then it was kind of the next step to go into consulting, which was my next goal. And then product was kind of interesting to me. So I was like, well, let's try this now. So it really is it's simple. I had a goal and I wanted to achieve it, and I did the work necessary to do it and achieve it. I feel like it really is true. You can do whatever you put your mind to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so in both roles, you were moderating a community forum, you were then you were consulting with clients directly. You're getting a lot of customer feedback, and I know you said there wasn't a great interface with the product management team, but how much do you think that hurt? Like if there's a product manager who is listening who isn't working with professional services or their customer success team, like what would your advice be to them based on your experience kind of on the other side of that coin?
So just having been on both sides now, I would say it's important to understand the pain points of not just your customers, but I mean, ideally the team around you, because professional services could be considered a customer if you think about it, because they're implementing your customer's product, and that's how it is in my organization, at least.
Yeah.
So it was very important for us to understand that, and I think that just wasn't a focus at that particular time. At least we're talking like 6-7 years ago. So the organization and the priorities have shifted, and leadership has changed, which has made a huge difference and made a lot of positive strides at Khoros, I think. But I think that my advice to anybody in product is to understand the teams and the problems that everybody is having, kind of, and especially if it's related to your realm. What are other teams running into in terms of roadblocks around that feature or product that you're developing, and to include those teams as stakeholders and treat them as if they are a customer and you're getting customer feedback, because you're essentially hearing customer feedback indirectly from your teams. So it's all valuable, it's all important. Not saying that they're right, but it's points of information that you can then act on.
Totally. I always say that product managers should embody like a sponge mindset, right? Where like if the water comes in, we soak it up, right? But even more so, we should be proactive in going out and getting it, because we need inputs, like a diverse set of inputs from a lot of different places to make quality decisions. So totally agree. So as you made that transition into product, so you had a lot of customer experience, hearing back feedback and like getting insights. But what would you say is the biggest paradigm shift or the biggest learning that you've had to make since making that transition, where now you have control of what decisions you make based on that feedback?
That's a great question. There's a number of them. I would say the biggest one is understanding the different team dynamics. Like, let's say you're working with an engineer and you need to communicate a problem to the engineering team. How do you communicate, or how do you best communicate the specifications, the user stories, the benefits of the solution, and also having the flexibility to to say yes and no to certain things. And you will get really in depth into the weeds on specific issues. So while product management itself is a strategic role, I think first and foremost, and it's important to make sure you're on track every week, you inevitably have to kind of wear a hard hat sometimes and dig into issues, because it's sometimes the answer is not always that simple. So
right.
That's why it's important to, I would say, heed your advice here, where it's important to, whenever you're faced with a problem and you have all this information to kind of work with, like, you can't assume that you're right, that your customer's right, that maybe your engineering team is right, but there's all this feedback you have to take into consideration, and you have to work to kind of whittle it down to the best solution. And you have to have arguments with people. You inevitably go through those growing pains. So even in like the 6 months that I've been doing this role, I've learned a lot about working with people, especially having a team focused mindset, and also an outcome focused mindset. So making sure that there's no ego across the board, especially with yourself, about what you think is right. You can't be married to the solution. You have to be married to the problem, kind of.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would say that's the paradigm shift I had to make, because as a consultant, in contrast, I'm also thinking about solutions, but I'm constrained to what the product allows me to do, but also I can kind of bend the rules a little bit, considering, and it's, in a way, it's similar, but now there's a lot more that I can have an impact on. So I can actually build a feature if it really is causing a problem, but I can't assume that that feature is right. So I don't know, it's very similar to consulting, in that you have to always communicate, and it's all about communication too. So sorry, that was a lot. There's so
No.
much to the role itself that I hope that best answers your question.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack in the role, and I like what you said, because it kind of, like, I think at first glance it sounded almost contradictory, but it's not, and that's like the weird part of product, is like you have to have dual focus of the problem and the outcome, right? And be stubborn on that, and like flexible in the middle. But in that flexibility in the middle, there's going to be conflict that comes up, but as long as you keep the problem, making sure that you understand the problem, that you framed it correctly, but also the outcome that you're trying to achieve, like the conflict will always be productive if it's centered around those two core pillars.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
So it's definitely a balancing act when it comes to products all around. So probably the most surprising thing, just kind of related to that question, is how like there may be a problem that you may have perceived as like very little in the past, but that problem could end up being such a huge impact to a customer.
Mhm.
So it's like understanding the problem versus the impact, and thinking about it holistically. You have to open your mind up a lot when you're in this role, much more so, I think, than in other roles that I've been in.
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to the never assume mentality, right? Like there's always the surface problem, and then there's multiple layers beneath that. And there's always like potential solutions, but then like what are the second order effects of those things? And so it's it's one of those things that product management almost like destroys your personal life in a way, because you always overthink things because you have to in this role. But yeah, I find myself feeling like a person who frustrates other people, because I'm like thinking of all the nuance, and they're like, it should be straightforward, and I'm like, but it's not. Just trust me, it's not.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I guess now that you've been in it for a little bit, like what is the biggest takeaway? What is the thing that you would leave, whether there's a new PM who's just starting out in a job, let's say on Monday, or an aspiring PM trying to break in? What advice would you leave them with?
So if you're a new PM in the role, I guess it depends on your experience level. Like if you're going from like a product owner into a product manager, I think you have a much better leg up in that situation, because you understand at least the team and aspect and creating stories and all that stuff. My role is quite very much so like joint product manager, product owner. So I have to do both.
Yep.
But as I would say, going into product management, the best advice I could give is start to invest your learning a lot more in, I would say, strategic thinking, and never assume that you're done learning anything, because that's another piece. And this goes for any job. It doesn't matter if it's product management. I think as humans in this world, it's always best to adopt that continuous learning cycle. I still haven't read that book that I think you recommended, Continuous Discovery Habits, but it's on my list. And I feel like what I'm saying kind of resonates with that. But yeah, that's what I've learned, is never stop learning. And it is easy to get obsessed with the problem too. and try to find solutions, but it's also very easy to burn out. That's another point, is you want to be careful in terms of like how much time you're spending, because if you spend too much time, you're actually stifling your creativity as well. So it's very important to, where you can, take breaks and, be mindful of your feelings, like in the day to day, because it's very easy to feel burned out. I know this especially because lately, so our focus now is kind of like on, we're building like an overhaul to our community platform. Essentially, it's a very, very big project. So there's an infinite amount of things that we need to get in for MVP. So it's very easy to get lost into the details, and then it's hard to kind of go back up to that like bird's eye view. So it's just very important to be mindful of like your state of mind, take breaks when you need to, and don't stress yourself out. Even though you have one of the most stressful jobs on the planet.
Agreed. Yeah, it kind of harkens back to what you said at the very beginning of how you saw that career growth so quickly, joining Khoros, right? Where you had that learn it all mentality that Satya Nadella talks about from, I think it's the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, where you don't want to be a know-it-all, you want to be a learn-it-all. And if you get 1% better every day and you're intentional about it, then you're going to do great in your role, which it seems like that's worked out well for you in your career and is going to serve you well as a product manager into the future. So
awesome. Yep, so far.
So far. Cool, man. Well, Larry, appreciate you joining. And this has been a pleasure connecting and learning from you, and an honor to have you on to share with others.
Yep, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching on the YouTube channel. If you're watching or if you're listening on the podcast, make sure that you rate and review and subscribe or follow if you haven't already. And thanks for joining me this week, and we'll see you next week for another lesson in product management.